Hey guys, so a little sneak peek of finished product here in the garage, but I wanted to talk a little bit at the beginning of this video about, it got cold out here. The rain's kind of rolling out. This is the remnants of tropical depression, whatever, that just went through Florida. Today's November 11th, I think. So, trim debacle, that was pretty interesting. So, originally I'd reached out to a guy that I know who does trim carpentry, does like high-end trim carpentry. Reached out to him, asked him to give me a quote. He came by, did some measurements, blah, 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 blah. I sent him the specs. I sent him the breakdown of all the trim, and then I'd never heard back from him, okay? So then I reached out to another trim guy who does trim for a buddy of mine who builds houses. Custom home builder, somewhat kind of in this area, although he's a little bit more on the Gwinnett County side. Reached out to that trim guy. He's actually not that far away, less than an hour away from here drive. So he was like, yeah, I'll do the trim. So he came by, he measured everything out. He gave me a quote, blah, 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 blah. And I said, great, well, I'll have the trim deliver. I asked him, when can you get started? And he said, I can get started in a couple weeks. So I said, okay, perfect. Awesome. Sounds like a plan. So I scheduled the trim to get dropped in like a week and a half later or something like that, right? Because I had already went ahead and hung all the interior doors. So we had ordered our interior doors like a month before. I went ahead and hung almost all the interior doors. Just went ahead and started that on my own. My dad helped me. He and I knocked it out in a weekend and hung all but like, there were, I think, 3 doors, and the reason that we didn't hang them is because the doors were the wrong size. So I had to get the lumber company back involved to come back. One of those doors they had to fix again for the second time. So third time's a charm, right? So I went ahead and hung all the interior doors, but we had all the crown and the base and all that stuff. I also wanted to do the trim after we did the hardwood floors, but what ended up happening is my hardwood floors got delayed. They were shipping from Florida, and they didn't have enough of them, so they had to they had to wait for another shipment to come in. So we couldn't get our hardwood floors in time. So I said, all right, whatever. We're gonna go ahead and install all of the trim. We're gonna do the baseboards. And basically what we did is I had the hardwood floor guys start on that end of the house and work their way back this way towards the back. So basically, we left off the baseboards on the back side of the house, so that as the hardwood floor guys kind of work their way backwards, when they get to that last course, when they go to lay it down, they can lay that last board down, and then we would install the baseboards afterwards. So I did that in multiple places throughout the house, and we went ahead and cut them and fit the baseboards, but I set them aside, and I had my painters go ahead and spray them and paint them. So then once we installed them, all they had to come back and do is caulk and, touch up the nail holes and then touch up the paint on the caulk bead, and basically it was already painted. Because I actually had the painters come in and paint and spray all of the trim before we did the hardwood floors, and the hardwood floor guys came in afterwards. So we had the floors put in, went to start doing the trim. I ordered the trim, had the trim dropped, and then reached out to the guy. I had also communicated with him in between, and he said, yeah, responded to me, and then all of a sudden he's like, calls me one day, and he's like, yeah, I can't do your trim. I'm sorry. I'm just too covered up. I'm 3 weeks out now. And I was like, well, dude, I talked to you 2 weeks ago, and you were 2 weeks out. And we shook on it and agreed to do the job and whatever. So then here I am. I've got a whole pile of trim in the garage right here, just piled up. I had it all delivered. It was a lot of trim. And what am I going to do now? So I was like, all right, well, I'm going to make the decision. I'm going to go ahead and start laying trim myself. And so I started myself. And then I was talking to my roofer buddy, Corey, that did our roof, and he was like, well, hey, I got a buddy who he's an insurance adjuster, but he used to actually run a trim carpentry crew years ago. And my buddy's a licensed he's a public adjuster, so he he works for himself and he has a lot of free time, and he's been talking about wanting to do some construction projects. So he gave me his number, and I called this guy, David. David's a cool dude. Me and David have become friends. And David's like, yeah, man, I'll come help you. He's like, I mean, there'll be a few days where like I got to do office work or whatever, do my insurance stuff. But he's like, yeah, man, I'd love to come help. He's like, I miss that. I haven't worn a set of bags in years. So he came out. David started helping me. We agreed to a daily rate, and I basically just paid him per day to come out and help me. He knew what he was doing, which was nice. I didn't have to teach him anything. So he and I started running trim. He and I started on, I think it was like a Wednesday. I think it was like a Thursday is when we started running trim. And so he and I were running trim. And then Friday night, after we had started doing some trim, I stopped at Publix at the grocery store on the way home. And I ran into a buddy of mine who owns a grading business. Not my usual grading guy, Andy, but a different friend of mine who owns a grading company. And he was asking me about the house. He knew what was going on. He's like, hey, man, how's the house going? I said, it's great, but man, it sucks. I got to start having to run trim myself because my trim guy bailed out on me and couldn't perform. And he was like, well, hey, man, I know a really good trim guy. Let me get you in touch with him. So crazy story. Originally for this house, I wanted to actually use my dad's cousin to do trim here. My dad's cousin is a phenomenal trim carpenter, does really, really high-end homes. He's also a custom cabinet maker. Fantastic work. He is the definition of a true craftsman. But we lost touch with my dad's cousin years ago because he had moved, and we only had his home phone number, didn't have his cell phone number, and he had moved up to the mountains up in North Georgia, and we hadn't really heard from him in years, so we sort of lost touch with him. So all of a sudden, I'm at the grocery store running to my buddy, and he says, hey, I got this good trim guy. Well, guess who his good trim guy is? Is my dad's cousin. So anyways, I call up Rodney. Rodney's my dad's cousin. And I was like, hey, can you come help me? Like, can you help me out here? Like, what can you do? So this was Friday night. Rodney came by Sunday morning, came by to the house. He was ecstatic he came. I had my dad and my mom come. And actually Rodney, my mom had an interior design business here in Atlanta for many, many years. And Rodney did all of her custom millwork and custom cabinetry work and all that stuff for her for many years. So she was excited to see Rodney. We hadn't seen Rodney in years. And it's been a while because he's my dad's cousin. So, you know, my dad has a big family. So we saw Rodney, and Rodney came over and he looked at everything. He said, look, he said, you know, do you want me to do this, or do you want to do this? Because you've already kind of started and everything. And I said, well, I'll help you. Right. And Rodney said, well, how about I do this? Right. He said, we got to work in a cabinet shop all week this week. So why don't I send my trim guy on his crew? He has a guy that just runs trim. Steve is his name. And why don't I send Steve over here for the week? And he's like, why don't you just pay Steve his paycheck for the week instead of me paying Steve his paycheck? You know, he makes X amount in a week, and he'll come out here and work, 8 hours a day for you. And he'll run trim for you. And he does fantastic trim work. So I said, sounds like a plan. So that next Monday morning, Steve showed up here at 6:30 in the morning. Steve's here bright and early, 6:30 in the morning. So then me, Steve, and David ran trim, and it took us exactly 10 days to do all the trim in the house. Steve was running circles around us, man. I mean, I've done a lot of trim work, just various my projects or whatever, but Steve does trim day in and day out. Steve ran circles around me and David, but the three of us banged this whole thing out. We did all the trim in this house. We ran, I forget how many feet of baseboard and crown, and we did, was it 7.25 inch crown in the living room, and we ran it all. So in 10 days, we did all the trim in this house, got all the doors hung, and then I had to have the lumber company come back out and rehang one of the doors they screwed up on because they didn't have the door slab in stock, and that door slab was book width, which means it's the exact width. when they made the frame, they made it off of the dunnage door, which was less than book width, like 3/16 of an inch less than book width. So when we got the actual door slab, because it was on back order, when the real door slab came in, it didn't fit in the opening. So they actually had to come back and remake that opening. And then they had to come back and remake one of the bathroom doors where there was no excuse how they screwed it up. I don't even understand how they screwed it up. So pretty crazy story there. That was our trim story. So check out the rest of the video. We've got a lot of footage. I've got some pictures and stuff of the trim work and the trim crew. And also I'm going to throw all the cabinet stuff in here. Mike, my cabinet guy, is a fantastic cabinet guy. And I've been using Mike for a number of years to do cabinets on all my flips. So Mike did the cabinet work for us in there. Well, Mike did the RTA cabinets, all the white cabinets. The island in the kitchen and the master bathroom vanity were custom built cabinets by Travis, who is a local cabinet guy here in Canton. And Travis built those two things full custom. So thanks again, guys. Check out the rest of the video. Thanks. Bye. truck number 2 just left. So far we got 18 yards. It's 35 feet to there. It's probably 32 feet to there. I estimated this little area would be about 25 yards. And this is 18 yards so far, so we're actually pretty close. One more truck left. It's gonna take 6 trucks, 54 yards of concrete. Yay, can't wait to get the bill for this one. Fun times. Last truck.